but never will I forget. It ain't in me, sir." "Let it go at that, then. Here, shake hands, Kennedy. Now, good night." Another instant and Field was in saddle and speeding away toward the post where lights were now dancing about the quartermaster's corral, and firefly lamps were flitting down the slope toward the stables on the flats. Ray's men were already up and doing. Slowly, stiffly following, Pat Kennedy rubbed his aching head, with a hand that shook as never did his resolution. His bewildered brain was puzzling over a weighty problem. "The lieutenant's safe all right," he muttered, "but what's gone with the squaw that was shouting at Sioux at that murdering buck?" Meantime all Fort Frayne had seemed to wake to life. No call had sounded on the trumpet, no voice had ever been raised, save the invariable call of the sentries, passing from post to post the half hours of the night. But the stir at the guard house, the bustle over the barracks, the swift footsteps of sergeants or orderlies on the plank walk or resounding galleries, speedily roused first one sleeper, then another, and blinds began to fly open along the second floor fronts, and white robed forms seemed to appear at the windows, and inquiring voices, male or female, hailed the passer by with, "What's the matter, sergeant?" and the answer was all sufficient to rouse the entire garrison. "Captain Ray's troop ordered out, sir," or "ma'am," as the case might be. No need to add the well worn cause of such night excursions. Indians. The office was brightly lighted, and there, sleepy eyed and silent, were gathered many of the officers about their alert commander. Ray was down at his stables, passing judgment on the mounts. Only 50 were to go, the best half hundred in the sorrel troop, for it was to be a forced march. Neither horse nor man could be taken unless in prime condition, for a breakdown on part of either on the way meant delay to the entire command, or death by torture to the hapless trooper left behind. Small hope was there of a march made unobserved, for Stabber's band of Ogalallas had been for weeks encamped within plain view. Less hope was there of Stabber's holding aloof now that his brethren at the Big Horn had declared for war. He was a recalcitrant of the first magnitude, a sub chief who had never missed the warpath when the Sioux were afield, or the consolation trip to Washington between times. Where Stabber went, his young men followed unquestioning. It was a marvel that Kennedy had succeeded in getting through. It meant that the Indian runners, or the Indian smokes and signals, had not at once so covered the country with scouts that couriers could by no possibility slip between them. But now the signal fire was gleaming at Eagle Butte, and an answering blaze had flared from Stabber's camp. Invisible from Fort Frayne, they had both been seen by shrewd non-commissioned officers sent scouting up the Platte by Major Webb within half an hour of the coming of the alarm. "Ray will push ahead at once," said Webb to his silent subordinates. "You will see Colonel Plodder has only 2 troops up there, and he will need all his infantry to defend the post. I've wired to Lamari and to department headquarters, and further orders will come before noon. Let all the cavalry be ready. Then if we push out, Dade, we leave Fort Frayne to you. They'll hardly venture south of the Platte this time." "Is Mr. Field going with Captain Ray?" presently ventured young Ross, who knew Ray had but one subaltern for duty at that moment, and whose soul was burning with eagerness to accompany the first troop to take the field. "No," said the major shortly. "Captain Ray needs no more." "I only asked because Field isn't here, and I thought maybe " stumbled Ross ingloriously, but the mischief was done. "Mr. Field is busy," answered the major still more shortly, then reddened to his bushy brows, for at the doorway, in riding dress, and with a face the color of parchment, stood the officer in question. It was a moment that threatened panic, but Webb met the crisis with marked aplomb. "Oh, Field," he cried, "there's another matter. I want 2 good men to slip out at once and see how many of Stabber's people start or have started. It may be daybreak before they can tell. Sergeant Schreiber would be a tip-top man for one, and little Duffy. You tend to it." And so, mercifully, he sent the lad away until the crowd should have dispersed. Only Blake and Ray were with him when, after a while, Mr. Field returned and stood silently before them. Well he knew that the post commander could hardly overlook the absence of his adjutant at such a time. "Have you anything to tell me, Field?" was the major's only query, his tone full of gentle yet grave reproach. "I was restless. I could not sleep, sir. I went out purposely." "You know no horse can be taken from the stables at night except in the presence of the sergeant or corporal of the guard?" "I took none, sir," was the answer, and now both faces were white. "I rode one of Mr. Hay's." For one moment there was no sound but the loud ticking of the big office clock. Then came the question: "Who rode the others, Field? The sentries say they heard 3." There was another moment of silence. Ray stepped on tiptoe to the door, as though he wanted not to hear. Blake looked blankly out the window. Then the young soldier spoke. "I cannot tell you, sir." For full 10 seconds the post commander sat with grave, pallid face, looking straight into the eyes of the young staff officer. White as his senior, but with eyes as unflinching, Field returned the gaze. At last the major's voice was heard again, sad and constrained. "Field, Captain Ray starts on a forced march at 1 for Fort Beecher. I wish you to go with him." CHAPTER 4